Like I've been working on this for a while, but I want to be relaxed and I want to enjoy things. I want to enjoy my kids. I want to enjoy my work, my friends. And I think, unfortunately, this anxiety and depression has been a part of who I've been probably for my whole life. I just want to be free of it.
That was Will, an award-winning independent video producer, sharing a thought that many people who live with mental illness have thought. When can I be free? When can I be done with living with this thing? But the truth is we can't, and so we settle. We learn to cope. Will learned that working for a big company didn't work for him, so he forged out on his own. In this episode of Silent Superheroes, Will shares some of the things that he's learned help him. He's found a therapist who acts as an advocate. He makes occasional, judicious use of medication, and he has a determination to live free of anxiety and depression. When we talk about living with mental illness, sometimes you hear something that changes your perspective. In this episode, Will and I talk about our experiences of travel, and in doing so, he leads me to an important insight that has changed the way I think about traveling on my own. The people you hear on Silent Superheroes are discussing their personal experience of living with mental illness. If you're considering a change to your treatment plan, please consult with a trained medical professional. My name's James Pratt. I'm the host of Silent Superheroes, and I'm really glad that you're here.
Welcome to the Silent Superheroes podcast, a series of frank conversations about mental health at work.
Welcome to Silent Superheroes. I'm here today with Will. Will, nice to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with, tell us who you are, what do you do, and what's the mental illness or illnesses that you manage?
My name's Will. I live in Seattle, and at the moment I'm an independent filmmaker. So I make marketing videos and fun stories. My mental illness, it's actually kind of weird to think of it as that. It feels like a disease or something. And so I suffer, I don't know if that's even the right word, but I have depression and anxiety. So, different moods, mood swings at times and anxious in certain moments. And so it kind of comes in and out during my life, during different phases. I think that sounds kind of clunky.
But that's your experience.
Yeah. It is clunky. I mean, I've gone through my life, I'm 43 years old right now. I'd say the first 34 years of my life, the word depression wasn't part of my vocabulary. I think I was able to do really well in school, in athletics, at work, and for those first 35 years of my life. And looking back, I think one of the things I've noticed is that, let's take work, for example. Some points later in the latter points of my career, I was managing a team and people, and there was a lot of stress working at a client site. I was a consultant, and just having a task to complete helped me get it done. Obviously, we all have stress that I don't know if endure is the right word, but we're all stressed at work at different phases. So just having a deadline, having a team that depends on me has helped me get through any mental challenges that I've had.
It seems like there was a kind of milestone around 34, I think. So tell us more about that. What happened then?
I was working as a consultant and managing a team, working on multiple projects. One particular project was really stressful. I remember taking a vacation with my family. We went to Hawaii and just realizing how relaxing it was to be away from work and on vacation. Coming back from that trip, I decided that I was going to take a sabbatical. And really, sabbatical is just the friendly term for I'm quitting, but I called it a sabbatical.
Sure.
And what was interesting is when I told my peers that other managers at this company that I was taking a sabbatical, everyone came back with, how can you afford that to just stop working? And especially given that you're making money right now, and then also there are all these expenses. And I kind of laughed at that because maybe not so openly to them, but I don't have an extravagant lifestyle. Right. Our cars are older. I have a lot of money. We have money saved. Mm-hmm. So I could go for quite a while without working.
Yeah.
And I felt like my sanity was more important than continuing this job that was very stressful.
How was that stress showing up at that time? You said you wanted to protect your sanity.
On the job, it showed up as anxiety. And I want to do a good job for whoever, right? So for my customers, for my company. And I put a lot of pressure on myself to do well. And so if I felt like things weren't going well, I'd get pretty, like, I don't know if I'd literally start shaking, but it's kind of manifest itself. How would it manifest itself? I mean, I wasn't sleeping very well, and I had a lot of work to do, lots of different tasks that needed to be accomplished. So a lot of multitasking, had a family, kids. Just being able to do a good job at work and at home was proving to be pretty difficult. In some ways, work takes over and becomes more of a priority, which, looking back, kind of sucks.
What at that time, is the internal dialogue around anxiety?
I mean, an example is I have a big deliverable to produce. Right now I'm making, from a film perspective, I have this cut that I want to deliver. I have hours of footage, lots of audio, lots of images, and try to put it together. Generally in film, when you do, the first cut is usually awful. I want my clients to be happy so they pay me, but probably more importantly, so that they enjoy and appreciate the final work product. And so there's a lot of pressure I put on myself to be perfect. So the second cut is generally better. And when I send that off, I see all the things that I want to fix. And even if I get positive feedback from the client, I ruminate and think about, I could have done better. Or I should have spent more time on this, or I should have gotten it done sooner. So it's a lot of the internal dialogue is, I guess it's doubting myself. It's it's not fun. And I think one of the byproducts of that is it's hard to enjoy life if I'm spending so much time worrying about what other people think because I want them to be happy with what I give them.
I think a lot of people listening would say, I worry about stuff, or if I've got a big project, I get stressed about it. I have doubts about the quality of my work. For you, how is that anxiety different than kind of the general stress of work or day to day?
That's a great question. I think the difference is that maybe I identify myself as the work that I do. So if I don't do a good job, then I am a bad person. Or if they're not happy, I'm a bad person. Yeah. And what I've learned as I've gone through therapy is that I think, first off, one way to think about it is like, who gives a shit what other people think? Right. And that's actually very helpful a lot of times. Yeah. And then the other is, what's the catastrophe? Do they really not like your work? So are you projecting your anxieties on them? Yeah. Which fuels and makes it worse. And so if I'm able to step back and think about it rationally like that, it's obviously a lot easier.
So that dialogue in your head is, I'm a piece of crap because these people aren't going to like what I do. Yeah. So it's a very personal internal dialogue.
It is. And I think why it's so difficult is that those feelings of doubt and bad self-worth they're sticky. You can't move on to the next thing. I mean, I don't know that I want to talk about my current client, but I mean, I had this feeling going into this meeting. I was worried. They're very happy with what we're doing. Turns out I need to go, and I've offered this. I'm going to go do some reshoots of some of the scenes that we want. Like, everything's great. But going into the meeting, I think about, what if they don't like it? And I think the mind is a complicated mechanism. And my goal in the next year or so is, I've been working on this for a while, but I want to be able to, I want to be relaxed and I want to enjoy things. I want to enjoy my kids. I want to enjoy my work, my friends. And I think, unfortunately, this anxiety and depression has been a part of who I've been probably for my whole life. I just want to be free of it.
It sounds like it's something that's persistent. Like, it's almost always there. What I heard was it robs the fun of things and the enjoyment.
Yeah, you get stuck in kind of the down cycle.
You mentioned that you work with a therapist. So talk to us about your journey there and like how you went from, wow, I'm super stressed at work, to I need to go talk to a therapist about this, and what other things that you've done to help you kind of figure this thing out, manage it.
It took a long time for me to agree or decide to go to a therapist, because it just feels, even this freaking interview with you it just feels so raw and vulnerable to so other people can hear what your thoughts are on this topic. It's very personal. It took me a long time to go. The treatment side was two parts. One is getting some medicine, some prescription, some medicine to help stabilize, and then the other was the talk therapy component. I mean, I found that to be super helpful, the talk therapy component, to kind of help me restructure how I conceive or how I conceptualize what I'm thinking.
How did you pick a therapist? How did you find someone that you wanted to work with?
Yeah, that's tough. I had a list of a couple therapists and I called them. I left messages for all of them. I don't think they ever answer their phones, their office phones.
I've had that experience where like you call up and you're dying inside and like, call me. Like I'm kind of desperate here. Like, why aren't you calling me back? Yeah, I've had that.
Actually, all those messages say, if you have an emergency, hang up and dial 911.
They do, 911. That's absolutely right. It's like, I don't think I'm there, but like, I want to talk to somebody who can like make me feel good. So yeah, I definitely had that experience.
Yeah, so only one of them had space and she got back to me. I went in and it was a really good match. Yeah. It was good to have someone independent to talk to who's not in my daily life, who is, I've talked to her about this, like she's my advocate and she's working with me. And so if there are other people in my life where I'm having challenges with, she will advocate for me.
So you mentioned the word advocate about your therapist. So talk to us about how she's an advocate for you as it relates to your work.
In the past, if I've had people that I'm working with and there are challenges communicating or disagreements, her role is not to fix the situation. Her role is to help me in my experience with the situation. So either dealing with how I'm feeling about myself, self-doubt or anxiety, or suggestions for communicating with someone to get to a resolution. In the end, her priority is my sanity or my mental health.
Yeah, yeah. Will's decision to leave the video production agency was both bold and counterintuitive. It was counterintuitive because, as his co-workers pointed out, what will you do for money? But for Will, this was about looking after himself, and he was fortunate enough that he could live without the regular paycheck. Working as an independent video producer means that all the demands on Will are his own. His anxiety and depression are no longer exacerbated by the needs of others. Will's found a therapist that he describes as an advocate, a partner to him in checking his thoughts. Therapy, I think, is an important part of managing any mental illness. But I wondered, what else does Will do? You said you've tried some medication to help with the anxiety. What medications have you tried, and what's been your experience of using medication?
So in the beginning, when I was very anxious, when I was having kind of anxiety, I don't know if they're attacks, but just feeling very anxious, I took, I think it's called clonazepam.
Okay.
And it's kind of a scary drug because it deadens all of your senses. It's almost like it puts you to sleep, but you're still awake. I think of my facial expressions just relax, my face relaxing and having no expression. Like it's almost like you're in slow motion. And so it helps with the anxiety, but you're in slow motion.
Yeah.
So, and actually I think that particular one is very addictive. So you don't want to be on that long term. I would use it for kind of short term instances where I was feeling super anxious.
So it sounds like something you can start and stop very easily, because that's not true for all, certainly for depression medications. You know, you often have to taper up and taper down. So it sounds like that you can just hit for a while and then leave.
Correct. After the first couple months, half a year, I don't use that prescription anymore. I don't need that. The other prescription I have is a generic version of Zoloft. I take that. I've been taking that for 5, 6, 7 years. I think it works. It's hard to tell if the prescription is working or not because you're still having hard times and good times and bad times. But I do know if you stop taking it suddenly, that really sucks. I went away for a weekend and I forgot to bring the prescription. And by the third day, I was starting to feel a little shaky. And just feeling nervous or anxious. And so the lesson learned is obviously don't forget to bring it. But also you can't quit cold turkey on these things. You need to taper down if you do taper down.
Yeah.
So
I've had that experience. I was going to an event with somebody. I had to give a short speech. I had to introduce this person I was going with. As the day wore on, I started to feel really ill at ease and uncomfortable. And I thought, this is weird. Like, I'm used to standing on stage in front of people. Like, I actually like doing that. Why do I feel so weird? And it wasn't until I think as I got home or the next morning, I looked at like my little pill tray and I'm like, oh, I forgot to take my medication. And now I know, like, if I have that feeling, it's like, you've forgotten to take your meds. And I forget extremely infrequently. But when I do, I see the difference immediately in my mood.
Like if you forget that morning, that day, you feel it?
By the afternoon, I start to feel a little bit, it's hard to describe it, but ill at ease, just kind of uncomfortable, maybe out of my body or disconnected from the world.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah.
It's like you've maybe it's almost like you've had 10 cups of coffee. So you're kind of, everything's moving fast. And I don't know, you just want to go take a nap or something.
Yeah. So you said generic Zoloft. Is that for the anxiety, the depression, both?
It's for both.
Okay.
I think initially for both.
We talked about anxiety, and you said at the start here that you experience both anxiety and depression. Let's talk about the depression side. What's your experience of that?
I guess I don't really know how to talk about it. What is depression? And I know there's a score or like a little quiz you can take. Yeah. A scale, you take it to kind of see where you are. And some of the questions, I fill it out occasionally to get snapshots. Right. And
so your therapist from time to time kind of checks in to see, on the scale, on the checklist, where are you right now? Yeah.
Obviously that fluctuates depending on what's happening for me. And a lot of the questions are around mood and enjoyment of things. Are you sleeping or eating patterns and things like that? Filling out that form is actually helpful in and of itself, because then I realize what some of the areas are that I need to focus on. Mm-hmm. I'm not answering your question about the depression in general, but I think when I do go into a session and things are not great, I generally say to my therapist, I know the things I need to do to fix this. Mm-hmm. I just can't do it right now. And
that comes up so often when I talk to people about depression. It's like, I know what's going on. I know what I need to do. I know that life is good, rationally speaking. My brain won't let me believe it.
Yeah. So I know I need to exercise. Yeah. I know I need to spend time with friends. I need to do some work. I need to, whatever it is, I need to not drink as much alcohol. I know, but when you're in the moment, I wish there was a pill that would take you out of that moment. Maybe it's like somebody slapping you in the face really hard. I think that's where there are people who cut. I asked my therapist about it in jest, and she said when they do it, it's a chemical change in your body, and it allows people to change the subject and move on and be happy. I think for me, exercise and working out really hard is helpful, because it hurts, and you're really exerting yourself, and you're focused on the pain and working out, and then you feel good afterwards. Yeah. That's when you're in that pain and your mind is, I don't know if it's overloading or what's happening. I think we want to escape. And so suicidal thoughts are a way to think like, oh, if I were dead, then I wouldn't have these thoughts anymore. That sounds like a reasonable solution. Right. And obviously it's the dumbest solution. Yeah. But other ways of escape is kind of avoiding things. Mm-hmm. And so, in the past, I would find myself binge watching a Netflix series, because then I'm not in my body. I'm watching this movie, the show. I'm the character in the show. I'm going through whatever adventure they're having is my adventure. I think escape is a common, at least for me, the thoughts of escaping in some way. And
I've done a lot of travel for business actually, and I do find, now you mention it, that when I'm at the airport, and there's like nothing I have to deal with. Like I just shut off to all the, TSA security madness, and just, I can sit there at the gate and no one's going to talk to me and no one's going to want anything from me. I find that a super peaceful place, which is funny because the airport is super stressful for a lot of people. But, and then being able to be on the plane and hoping somebody doesn't talk to me, and like I can go to a hotel room and I can just sit there and not do anything. You're right. I mean, now I think about it, I actually have those moments of escape, and I've actually felt guilty about being happy to be away from my family at those times.
You should notice those instances when you have that and appreciate it, I think, because and not feel guilty. because you can't do anything about it.
That's what's so great about doing this for me is I get to see myself in a different way. Talk to somebody else who has bipolar depression, and she helped me realize the importance of stability for people who have bipolar. Regular routine, having to do certain things at certain times can be really helpful. That's been great. And now next time I travel and I'm feeling like, wow, this actually feels okay to be on my own in a hotel room, I'll think about it differently. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Good.
I was thinking as you were talking about your work, there's a stereotype, there's a trope of creative people, like great artists being people who battle with, inner demons. But I think if we cast those in just so everybody knows, Will was making the Van Gogh ear cutting gesture. But I think if we were to go back, if we were able to go back in time with the diagnostic standards we have now, I think somebody like that would probably be diagnosed with depression, maybe bipolar disorder. So there's this trope and this idea that depression, creativity go hand in hand, and somehow depression supports that creativity. Like you get access to something that other people don't have. As somebody who works in a creative profession, what's your perspective or experience of that?
I would never think, oh, thank goodness I have these mental challenges because it makes me creative. Like I would never think of it that way, but I tend to get excited about lots of ideas. And so I think maybe creative people might be more distractible and excited, kind of instantly excited about ideas, or they'll be thinking about ideas all the time. And I think about things all the time. And it's not actually debilitating in a way. It can be for some to get work actually done. So I think that I'm an introvert. And if you ask other people, and I'll ask you, outwardly, I seem like I'm very extroverted. Yeah. And I talk to people, I say whatever's on my mind. And I think I do a good job compensating for being an introvert. I'm a shy person. And I think one of my social anxieties is, I want people to like me. So I will say things that seem crazy. And for me, a lot of those things are just being honest with what I see, or I'll have a thought of something that might be inappropriate. I think the fine line that I'm walking on is one, I want someone to like me, but also I want to have fun. I want to enjoy myself and be at peace. And so it's this fine line of saying something inappropriate or is it funny? And so I'm learning, sometimes it works really well. Yeah. Sometimes it's like, oh shit, you should not have said that.
It's part of it. It almost feels like part of that approach to management. Like you said, social anxiety. I know in certain situations that anxiety is going to flare up. So you are starting to find ways to manage that. Like going into the situation knowing this thing might flare up and I'm going to be uncomfortable, but I'm going to try and use humor. Yeah. Humor is my way to kind of help me feel like I'm in control in the situation, but comfortable.
Yeah. I remember back to when I was in middle school, high school, very shy. Like I think I became, or I was trying to figure out what's going on. Why don't I talk to people, or just how come I don't have a lot of friends? And sarcasm and humor was something that I developed, and I'm still working on it because, again, sometimes I go too far. And it's interesting to see my daughter has kind of picked up some of that, and it's interesting to see a mini me, scary actually, to see that. But I think that, that was one way that I've kind of compensated or tried to overcome social anxiety.
You'd make a good Brit. We use sarcasm and humor as a way of not having to interact directly with people.
Oh, is it kind of passive aggressive?
I don't know if it's passive aggressive, but we have this tendency of everybody's always putting everybody else down. I think you'd call it like busting your chops, right? Just absolutely constantly. And certainly I remember when I moved to the US, Brit, you learn to be very sarcastic. And I would sometimes say something that was sarcastic and people wouldn't realize it was sarcastic. So maybe it's that thing that you're talking about, like you say something and it's funny if you get the sarcasm, but if you don't, you sound like an asshole.
Yes. And then your friends who witness that think you're an asshole and they're embarrassed. Yeah, I think what you're talking about is the deadpan of
perhaps
of what you're saying. Yeah. I love doing that, by the way. We need to spend more time together.
Yeah, evidently. Talked about social anxiety. You've mentioned anxiety around work. Does anxiety show up in any other places in your life?
This is, I'd say, the opposite of being anxious. For me, I'm the most relaxed when I'm traveling.
Right.
And, I took a trip with my kids last summer to Italy, and it was great. There was not a set agenda, and I'm pretty flexible. It was nice to kind of go with the flow and figure out things, meet some new people. In fact, I've been back twice since then alone. And when you were talking about running away, like I was thinking, oh, was I running away? And maybe I was, but I was working on some projects, and it's just nice to go with your whatever ideas you have at the moment. I don't know if this goes back to the creative mind thing as well.
Maybe, but it's interesting because for some people, travel is a super anxiety-inducing activity. It's interesting for you. Travel is a relief. It's something that you really enjoy. It's something about the home work environment, like the day-to-day life, that creates anxiety for you.
Yeah. It's kind of backwards.
I mean, it just is, right?
Yeah. That's interesting. I hadn't really thought about it like that.
Talking about mental illness is hard. Sometimes we have so much shame attached to our thoughts that it's painful to bring them into the open. But I've found in talking about it, we feel less alone. And sometimes we learn new ways to cope, new ways to manage, even if that's seeing things through somebody else's eyes. In sharing with Will that sometimes I feel guilty when I'm traveling and I'm enjoying the time on my own, I got a new perspective. Will reminded me it's okay to look after myself, and maybe I should think about that time alone differently. Looking after yourself means different things to different people. For Will, it means going to therapy or doing exercise. But it's also the freedom to travel with his kids, able to be free of his anxiety, at least for a week or two, to take time where there are no demands put on him, like the demands put on him by the company that he worked for. It felt important to me to learn a little bit more about Will's work. What does it take to be a good video producer?
I'd say the most important component is being able to tell a story and having a vision. So starting from that point and then getting the talent or location lined up. So you need to be organized. I'd say creative, being able to tell a story, and then obviously filming good shots or recording good audio. But then once that's done, you need to edit things together, kind of like you're going to edit this podcast. There's just a lot of components to it. I think in bigger production houses, they have different people doing each part. And so as an independent producer person, I do all of those pieces. Yeah, you need to know a lot. Yeah, just being able to work independently, which is probably the hardest thing to do for someone who's got mental illness challenges.
Although I note that when you were first describing anxiety, it seemed to really become clear to you at a time when you were working with other people and you had other people who had needs and were depending on you. And so I'm almost wondering if the change to work on your own is actually a positive management tactic.
Yeah, I think that's helped in a way. I do miss interacting with people sometimes. So thanks for inviting me over for the podcast.
No worries. Anytime. We don't have to record the conversation, of course.
Good. Yeah, I mean, obviously working independently, there's more stress from a financial perspective, making money. But in a way, I think that's motivating too. So this is the first job that I've had where I'm working independently. So I don't have a place I go to work. There's no structure. And you talked about having structure is important.
Yeah,
so
for me.
For you, I'd say for anyone with mental illness challenges, like it is difficult to not have structure. And so I need to be a self-starter. I need to get business. I need to work on projects. And so I think where it gets in the way is actually, what's really helpful is having deadlines. Like I need to get something done by a certain date, and I'll actually create the deadlines myself so that I do it. From a video producer perspective, if I were working at a company with someone else, I'd say it'd be much easier because I go to work, they set the schedule. And so now I need to set the schedule and do the work. So that makes it more challenging.
Yeah. There's the theory of optimum stress, which applies to all organisms, from the very, very simple sea slug through to human beings. And the theory says that all organisms need some level of stress, right? They need some level of stress as a motivator to get them to do things that are ultimately good for them, whatever it might be, a sea slug. I don't know what's important to them, but, for a human being to, get out of bed or, make money or go find food or whatever it might be. So, I think what you're describing is that stress is helpful because it keeps you active and doing things and motivating. Absolutely. So when your depression comes to the fore, what does that mean for the work that you do?
I haven't really thought of it like that directly. When I'm in the dumps or whatever it is, I tend to have a hard time sitting down and being productive. So like I'll sit down, start working and just think, this is no good. I can't focus on this. And then I'll go get a snack. Right. I go to the fridge. The fridge is a big downfall for me. What I've done to handle that is I'll work at a coffee shop where I'm not in the house. I can't go to the fridge. I can't watch Netflix, although I probably could.
And you could go to the counter and get a snack, by the way. So but there's a place it costs $5.
Exactly. I got to pay for it. And I can't take a nap. Naps are a really good avoidance tactic. So I think in those moments, I look for ways to avoid and distract myself from it. So I think that is the biggest challenge. One of the things for avoiding things is obviously watching TV. Thank you, Netflix, for providing great material. Yeah. Amazon Prime too, but damn it sucks sometimes. And so, and then I'll stay up late watching a series. And one of the things I realized is that sleep is so important. Just staying up late it's just not fun. Yeah. It's distracting, but it screws up the next day. Right. So it kind of keeps that cycle going.
I'm reading a book right now by an author called Dean Burnett called Idiot Brain. He's a neuroscientist, I believe well-respected neuroscientist. And in the intro to the book, he talks a lot about kind of interesting things about the brain. And one of the interesting things about the brain is we have no idea why we sleep. We have no idea what the actual purpose of sleep is. And there could be logical reasons, like if you go back 10,000 years, animals aren't that active at night. And so you're shutting down the same time that they are, through to, ordering memory and encoding memories. And that's what happens during sleep. But what if everybody can agree on is it's necessary? Okay. Whatever is actually happening, we have no idea. It's necessary to get sleep. One of the characteristics of bipolar, particularly type 1 bipolar, which is not the type I have, is a tendency not to sleep. You said, if I stay up late watching Netflix, it cascades into the next day. And that seems to have been a common pattern with people I've talked to, where it's easy to get into a cycle of things that aren't helpful. You stop sleeping because I'm watching Netflix, and then the next day it makes it harder to focus on work. And if I don't focus on work, then the dialogue starts in my head and I have this deadline coming up and I'm anxious, so I don't sleep. And then it becomes a spiral of unhelpful behaviors, thoughts, whatever it might be.
I recently on Amazon Prime or Netflix watched the Twilight series. Okay. And I was in a way jealous of the vampires because they don't have to sleep. They never sleep. Yeah. And obviously we can't do that.
Yes, yeah. They also have to kill people, to be fair, to stay alive, which I don't think is a benefit or necessarily an upside, but I don't know, they seem to get on with it.
And I came up with that thought as I was binge watching a series, right? So it's kind of I wish I didn't have to sleep so that it wouldn't affect my next day. So I was hoping for an antidote.
How do you think society views anxiety and depression?
I think people see it as an excuse for poor performance. And I think my response to your question is probably guided by me projecting what other people would think.
Yeah. Which you talked about earlier as kind of part of that anxiety, like projecting that other people think that this work isn't good. What would you want people to know about anxiety and depression?
Don't do it. I was reading I saw something on Facebook or reading a quote somewhere. Whoever this person was advocating or basically saying that every person is having some kind of struggle. So when you're interacting with someone, pretend like they're having a struggle and there's something bigger going on in their life. So if their interaction with you is not the best from your perspective, know that something else is going on. So it's really to be kind to people and have empathy for whatever they might be going through. I think that's important. What was the original question?
Question was, what would you say to somebody? And what I heard is be kind, have empathy.
Yeah. Even if they're not showing signs of whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. What would make work easier for you as it relates to anxiety and depression? If you were working as a video producer in-house somewhere, perhaps, what would you need in terms of a support system in work to help you be a great video producer?
I mean, just the other day, I was thinking, maybe I was feeling sorry for myself, but I was thinking, wouldn't it be great if I didn't have to deal with this shit, like this depression and anxiety? And so that was the initial thought. And then I went on to, I want to fix this, right? And can I fix this? And how do I make it not be a problem? And so your question about how do I overcome or how do I set it up so that I can manage this in a work situation? I think I put it back on myself and how do I deal with it generally, and not in a work-related situation. And I know the podcast is kind of focuses on work in some ways, but I think sorting my own shit out on my own or with help will make it better in the workplace. I mean, I think from how can the workplace help if you're at a company that has health insurance or health benefits? I believe Washington State has a parity component to it where I don't know. I think this was might have been part of either Obamacare or the state mandated this. But I think in the past, the number of sessions you can have with your therapist was limited. And I know definitely in Washington State, like you can see them. I don't know if it's as much as you want, but it's easier to see a mental health professional, which I think is very important. So access. One other thought is like, I do not want someone treating me with, I don't know if it's called baby gloves.
Kid gloves.
Kid gloves. Yeah. Kid gloves. Like I don't want people to feel sorry for me. And that's partly why I don't, in a work situation, I don't talk about this shit because it sounds like an excuse. That's why I want to figure it out and, do well.
Treat you like any other member of the workforce.
Yeah.
With kindness and empathy.
Definitely.
If there was somebody out there who, suspected that they were dealing with anxiety or depression or had been just diagnosed, what would you want them to know? What would you tell them?
Don't give up. And there is help out there from therapy, prescriptions. And I think one of the key components is having friends that you can talk to about this. I think one of the things I tend to do when I'm in the dumps is I isolate myself and like I'll stay in my room. I won't shower and I just kind of like shut off the rest of the world. And that's not good. So really having a peer group some friends that you can talk to, having the right friends to talk to as well as like people who don't try to solve your problem because everyone's problem is unique and you just want to have someone that you can bounce ideas around. And I mean, I think even in this conversation with you, James, like you're not I'm going to solve your problem thing, which is great. Yeah. Like I think that just kind of hearing, and so maybe even people listening to this will get some ideas and you need to kind of figure it out on your own.
Yeah. It's a many-faced thing to figure out. I know for me, it took time to find all the pieces of the jigsaw. And I say I find all the pieces like I found them all. I don't think I have. Right. But you said don't give up. And I would add to that, keep working at it. Keep finding the things that work for you and putting those in place.
Yeah. I mean, it's not something that you just cure and you're good. It's lifelong. And I mean, if your goal is to ultimately enjoy your life, you got to keep working on it.
Yeah, that's great. I love that message. Thank you. Will, I really appreciate your time and coming to talk about, this topic. And thank you.
Thank you. It's fun.
So that's Will's story. A man in his 40s managing anxiety while working as an independent video producer. Will had been unsure about coming on Silent Superheroes. He hadn't talked much about his experiences outside of therapy. But as more people tell their story, it gets easier. We start to humanize mental illness. We stop being a monolith of the depressed or the anxious. We just become people managing a condition. Sometimes we want to be free, but we're managing it. If you like what you've heard today, please leave us a rating and a review on iTunes or wherever it is you get your podcasts. If you want to hear future Silent Superheroes episodes as they're released, please visit silentsuperheroes.com and sign up for our newsletter, or you can visit us at facebook.com/Silent Superheroes.
Take your mental health seriously. If you need to speak to someone, you can call 1-800-273-8255 or text crisistextline.org at 741-741. Both provide 24/7 confidential counseling to people in the United States. Worldwide, visit iasp.info/resources/crisis_centers/. To help others find the Silent Superheroes podcast, please leave a review on iTunes or your favorite podcasting service.